Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to react to I bought every PlayStation ever, I bought every Nintendo console ever, and I bought every Xbox ever, so we can see how much each of these big consoles have evolved. For PlayStation, from Nintendo's and Xbox. And I've made playlists with Mrwhosetheboss. I bought every iPhone, Galaxy. I will maybe put a link in the description for it. But now, let's begin into it.
Har du overvejet at lease din nye Kia? Du får lækkert udstyr, plads til hele familien og masser af køreglæde for en fast lav pris per måned. Service eftersyn er inkluderet. Til mere om Kia privatleasing på kia.com.
Wow, how fitting that advertisement is. Wow. 10 more seconds. Why? There we go.
Yeah, this is a real... I've just bought every single PlayStation brand new. We've got a TV from the time of each one's release and even the same game on all of them. So let's find out how much the gaming experience has evolved over time. It might sound strange now, but the original PlayStation was actually a massive risk for Sony. Because, put simply, Sony was a nobody. In 1994, the entire gaming market was just two companies. Nintendo, who hit a home run with the creation of Mario and had about 40% market share, and Sega, who having created Sonic, their equivalent to Mario, had taken the market by storm to achieve a share of 55%. Both of these titans were fighting tooth and nail to try and make their mascot the greatest 2D platformer of all time. But Sony realized something, that now is the perfect time for 3D. Yeah, this is a real sealed PlayStation 1, straight from 1994. And inside we've got the video adapter, in case your TV didn't have the right connectors, the AC adapter to plug into the mains, the controller, which was of course wired, and the console. Hopefully it turns on. This is ancient equipment. That sound! That's basically the sound of a cathode ray gun shooting electrons at the display panel. That's actually why they're called CRT TVs. Power on the original PlayStation. Buttons! I don't want to experience opening the disc drive. It's actually making me kind of sad that modern technology has no moving parts. Listen to this. No! The controller is so light, it kind of feels like it's not even there. And also, look at this, no analog sticks. There's one thing Sony smashed, it's buttons. This is so nice. Now, with only 2 megabytes of RAM, a maximum resolution of 480p, and no internal storage, the PS1 stats might sound pitiful by modern standards. I literally had to Amazon a 128 kilobyte storage card for it, which is very weird thing to do in 2022. But at the time when it was released, at today's equivalent of $570, this was the most powerful console money could buy. So this is Gran Turismo running on the PS1. And if you compare it to Nintendo or Sega's supposed 3D offerings, you'll quickly notice that Sony is the only one capable of rendering real 3D models with real reflections on the cars. It looks insane in comparison, but wait till you see what the next PlayStation can do. Sony also realized that they couldn't just be more powerful. Their brand also had to be different to Nintendo and Sega's. And their way of doing that was swapping the controller letters for shapes. And it wasn't because Sony loved geometry, the shapes have significance. For example, the blue cross and the red circle, they represent yes and no, which even now to this day is still what they're used for in games. Sony...
And we're going to find out which console is my favorite actually. But it is not a big surprise if you have heard it on some of my other videos. But let's continue.
Did also follow up the original PlayStation with what's referred to as the PlayStation Slim. But if I'm being really honest, we will be here forever if we start on the variations of each console. So, long story short, this company saw an opportunity and they absolutely smashed it with the first PlayStation. They completely wiped out Sega for good and practically pulled Nintendo's pants down. Coming out of nowhere with the PS1 becoming the first console ever to pass 100 million units sold. So, how did Sony top that? Well, only by releasing the best-selling console in the history of consoles. Sony's approach to the PlayStation 2, released in 2000 at about $485 in today's money, so significantly cheaper than the PS1, can be summed up with one phrase: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The PS2 is evolution, not revolution. And the unboxing experience also mirrors that philosophy. You get an upgraded controller, as well as a similar AC cable and TV adapter to last time. Oh, this brings back so many memories. Almost everything about the PS2 is a direct, no-frills improvement over its predecessor. It comes with about 12 times the amount of raw processing power, depending on how you measure it, 16 times the amount of RAM, and no less than 63 times the amount of storage on the default memory card. This had 8 megabytes gigabytes. Remember, back in the day, consoles didn't used to have these enormous hard drives inside of them to be able to install games onto. The entire game would be fit onto the game disc itself. And so the only extra storage you needed was just a memory card for your save files, which you could then take out and carry your saves to your friend's house with. So if we turn the PS2 on... Oh, wow. This is my childhood. So there's an eject button up here. That sounds amazing. You can barely read the actual text of what these things are. That difference is crazy. The difference versus the PS1 is absolutely night and day. The processing power allows it to render many times the amount of polygons on screen, which reduces the blocky look of the PS1 era. And the extra RAM allows for background textures to just have way more going on in them. Like even the finish line banner, it now blows about in the wind. And the master stroke with the PS2 was how Sony managed to, through the design of the console, make it extremely clear that this was a next-gen bit of kit. There's been a few consoles in the past, like Nintendo's Wii U, that look so similar to their last-gen counterparts that people thought that they were just add-ons. Not here. The PS2's design is far more bulky and angular, with this grille that was really meant to evoke the feeling of an engine, something capable of real power. That, combined with some of the best games of the generation, led the PlayStation 2 to break every record ever set, selling 158 million units.
I've seen someone else said it was 150 million, 55 million.
Nintendo's GameCube and Microsoft's original Xbox also around at this time, but they didn't even sell a fifth as much as the PS2 did. And to keep up with the increasing complexity of the games, Sony also upgraded the controller with something they called DualShock, which was a combination of dual analog sticks and built...
Wait, I've seen someone with their controller, PlayStation 1 controller, that first got it because they upgraded it, but...
It's in rumble technology. So you can really feel the texture of the grass, and if you're not a good driver like me, the texture of the wall. Sony wasn't kidding with the word rumble. The PS2 was also technically the first time you could play your games online, but you had to rely on the individual game developers to create their own servers, as Sony didn't develop their own infrastructure for online connectivity. Until the PlayStation 3, arguably the first Sony console to properly herald in the digital age.
No,
when you get your next big idea, say sparkly ketchup.
What?
This time round, internet was a focus, hence the included Ethernet cable, as well as the TV output cables and a USB mini cable to charge the further upgraded, now wireless controller. I probably don't need to tell you, but the PS3 was also the boldest console Sony had ever made. Look at this beefcake. Plus,
I don't have
do you recognize
that version. I have the super slim model. There's a slim and there's a super slim. I have the super slim model, and PS2 also have a slim model. Just so you guys know, if you didn't know.
Text. Yeah, that's the Spider-Man font, because Sony owns the Spider-Man IP, and they thought it would help them to sell more consoles. It did not. The good news is that the PS3 took some notes from the PS2 in the ramp everything up department. The bad news is that this time that also included the price. To try and make the PS3 feel like a completely new era in gaming, Sony had a special custom cell processor designed just for it. But this was really expensive, pushing the launch price of this console all the way up to $869 in today's money. Supremely pricey, especially given the console's creaky plastic exterior, but oh boy was this thing powerful. As a matter of fact, as an overall system, it was about 35 times more powerful than the PS2, making it 384 times more powerful than the PS1. These are ridiculous numbers. In fact, the PS3 was so advanced that it was actually used to build supercomputers, including a truly genius move by Stanford University researchers who developed an app called Folding at Home, which allowed PS3 users to dedicate a portion of their supercomputing power to aid with complex protein folding calculations, used to learn more about how to prevent diseases like Alzheimer's. It was also pretty good at games. So I never actually owned a PS3 at launch, but I remember how I felt when my friend got one for the first time. It really felt like a machine from the future. Like I remember being just giddy with excitement that something of this power actually existed. You also notice they've actually started putting attention into how the discs look at this point. And the disc loading mechanism, that's all inside the console now. There's no tray that comes...
Yeah, the normal and the slim. But super slim actually have the old when you can slide it up if you had a super slim model. Just so you know, I just sometimes let you guys know facts.
In and out. This console is not quiet, or cool for that matter. It's like an oven back here, and it's only on the home screen. You can kind of see that this is the point where the console became much more than just a place to play video games. It's the first time there's a proper home screen that you would actually want to spend time in. This literally used to be one of the coolest things in the world to me. The fact that you could change your home screen color. Oh yeah, the Friends tab. I spent a lot of time there.
Wow.
You think at that point that you can't make the same generational leap again, but this is it. And also you can actually feel the
thing that looks so much better than Skyrim, the graphic, because they also came in the PlayStation 3, but I guess the developer of them was not as great.
Mechanics of the game becoming more sophisticated as well. There's more physics involved. One problem that PS3 owners did used to have though was that because the on-off button was capacitive, their pets would often turn their consoles off. Don't get any ideas. So now we have the PS3 Gran Turismo next to the PS2, next to the PS1.
That's
I can't wait to complete this line, but already the leap is phenomenal. The first key difference being resolution. While the PS1 is outputting the game at 512 by 240, the PS2 is pushing over 3 times more pixels at 852 by 480, and the PS3 was running at 2 times that at 1280 by 720. Or in other words, for the very first time, true high definition gaming. This is basically the difference between you going into the settings on this video and swapping between 240p, 480p, and 720p. Massive. Wow. But it's not just more pixels, it's also much more complex game effects. One of the most impressive things about the PlayStation 3 was its ability to also handle almost lifelike lighting, shadows, and reflections. Not to mention vast, sprawling backgrounds. Something else I'm noticing is how much nicer the controller is. It's wireless, it's weightier because it's now got an inbuilt battery, and also has motion sensors built into it. And also, compared to the PS2's controller, the triggers just have much more travel. They call this the 6-axis controller, because as well as all the buttons.
But it got upgraded later to the DualShock 3 controller. Also,
it could also pick up how you moved the controller itself and translate that into the game. Even though it was the home to god-tier games like Grand Theft Auto 5 and The Last of Us, even though it was where Sony launched their free online PlayStation Network service, even though it also doubled as a media machine with full Blu-ray disc compatibility, Sony really screwed up that pricing. It ended up selling 84 million units, barely half of the PS2, and was slightly outsold.
I have seen so many other people who said that it still earned more than that was they were swapped actually the numbers, but he's the most recent I think that I got. Just so you know, guys.
By Microsoft's Xbox 360, Sony was on the back foot again. They needed to do something special. Thankfully, Microsoft did their job for them. When the PlayStation 4 launched up against the Xbox One in 2013, Microsoft screwed up their marketing so badly that Sony could have re-released the PlayStation 3 and probably still won. The fact that Microsoft forced users to also buy the Kinect camera with the console, forced users to be always online, and focused almost completely on how the next-gen Xbox would work as a TV box rather than a games console. It made it almost too easy for Team Blue. Sony even took to the stage to rip apart the Xbox One's deliberate inability to play borrowed games.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
What?
Thanks.
And it was pretty much game over at that point. Now, when you add to this that the PS4 was also insanely well designed, it starts to make sense why it completely popped off. Like, check out the new DualShock 4 controller. It incorporates the DualShock tech from the PS2 controller, and
that's like 3 or 4 times in my entire life. And that's only in friends' houses. And there is a slim model and a pro model, but mostly have heard of pro but not slim.
The 6-axis motion sensing from the PS3 controller, and it makes both aspects much more refined. The analog sticks are now also further apart, and they're concave for better grip. There's a new share button, which reflects the shift to social gaming. Plus, we've now also got an RGB LED light on the front as an identifier for which player you are, a speaker in the controller itself for a directional sound experience, and even a 2-inch touchpad in the middle for menu navigation. I remember the moment that I got to hold one of these for the first time, and I was just sat there like an idiot, like turning it over and over in my hands for 10 minutes straight, thinking, holy cow, this is real. The PS4 is about 10 times more powerful than the PS3, making it, the numbers are getting kind of out of hand at this point, about 3,800 times as powerful as the PS1. It had 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is 32 times the PS3, and 4,096 times the original PlayStation. And not to mention that because the PS4 is based off a less custom, more standard PC-like architecture, it was way easier for developers to work with it and fully extract that power.
iPhone 14 og iPhone 14 Plus. Super fede, ikke? Med Byt til nyt fra 3 kan du få dem til en ekstra god pris. Send din gamle, spar på din nye. Byt løs på 3.dk. Nemmere bliver det ikke.
iPhone 14 Come on, before you say something, please. Let's go.
You know, this kind of reminds me of the really, really early days of this channel. I remember when the PS4 launched, we had about 10,000 subscribers.
Wow.
I know that because we used to cover tons of gaming content at the time, but I would stick to handhelds because I would never dream of spending this much on one console. I know this section is all about the PS4, but all I can hear is this PS3. So this is actually quite exciting. This is the first time you can turn the console on with the controller. So this is very much a refined version.
Wait, did he say... Wait, what?
This is the first time you can turn the console on.
Excuse me, but I can turn my console on with my normal PlayStation 3 controller, so that's kind of funny when I said that PlayStation 4 was the first one. When the Super Slim can actually do it. Just saying.
With the controller. So this is very much a refined version of the PS3's home screen. Much more blocky in style. Oh my god, listen to it! It's louder than the PS3! There was me thinking this was going to be a nice, sleek, quiet machine. I only half blame Sony. This room that we're in is basically a sauna right now.
Let's
boot up the game. You can also tell the text is way sharper and more readable now. You can actually now pick the exact time of day of your race, and it will affect the weather conditions accordingly. You can feel such a visceral difference. The density of the crowd, the light coming directly from the sun. Right, so I've actually filled up a bag with ice just to cool it down, because this is getting ridiculous. I'm gonna lay it on top of the ice pack. In my mind, this is what a modern racing game looks like. The game almost has like an atmosphere that the other ones lack. Excuse my driving. I can actually also notice a bit of realistic damage on my car, so upgraded physics too.
What do you do with this much power then? Well, I mean, just for starters, a further doubling of the resolution to now 1080p or Full HD. The PS4 could happily fill a 40-inch TV and not look like it was being stretched. And it also just gave developers the headroom to be creative, to build not just detailed backgrounds, but fully open worlds, to execute their visions in their entirety. Plus, they could now add pretty much any visual effect they could think of. Dirt particles, motion blur, realistic fog, and it's in these details where you really feel the difference versus the PS3. So when you combine all of this with the fact that the PlayStation 4 also launched at a much friendlier $500 in today's money, it's not surprising that it went on to sell 120 million units, more than doubling Microsoft's competing Xbox One. It's kind of hard to imagine how this masterpiece can actually now be seen as a relic of the past. But the PS5 firmly pushes it aside, cementing itself as the wildest, most futuristic PlayStation to ever exist. And Sony has really run with this idea of futurism. Everything from the controller, to the console, to the headset they launched alongside it, it all shares this two-tone, ultra-minimalistic, space-age design philosophy. And I freaking love it.
Me too.
The moment I saw the PS5 get announced, I shrieked. Like, what gamer doesn't want a console that looks like a literal alien starship? And I mean, it makes the Xbox Series X that it's competing against look like a prude by comparison. There is also this strangely shaped stand, which actually very cleverly can support the console either horizontally or vertically. But do the internals keep up? Absolutely. The PlayStation 5 dunks on its predecessor. It has 2 times the RAM at 16 gigabytes, and its core graphics processing unit is about 8 times more powerful. And that's not even factoring in its solid-state storage that's at least 50 times faster than the PlayStation 4's hard drive. And this is the fun part about compounding multiples. When compared to the original PS1, the PS5 is approximately 30,000 times more powerful. You could make a bridge of PlayStation 1s spanning an entire city, and it's...
We should just think how large is the city, because they're small and...
still wouldn't be able to outperform a single PS5.
Let's see how the PS5 compares. Love these LEDs on the inside. Such a classy touch. This is such a fun video as well. Hey, if you want to see me make a comparison of every Nintendo console ever, then a sub to the channel would be
We already know it.
Oh my god, I'm blinded. Adjust HDR. Oh, that is actually one of the new features here. Just like insane levels of contrast. I know we're only on the homepage right now, but this screen... The one thing you really notice about the PS5's UI is everything is very visual and full screen. Wow. The amount of
buildings. You can see individual settlements over here in the background. Okay, just look at the difference in color between this screen and this screen. A lot of that is just the new high dynamic range. I can hear applause coming through the speaker in the controller. You can even see the clouds in the sky reflected on the body of my car and moving in real time. God, it's so rumbly. Okay, this is a huge upgrade, even from the PS4. Not only is the resolution now full 4K, 4 times higher than 1080p, but the PS5 is also capable of real-time ray tracing. Meaning that instead of pre-baking the light reflections into a scene, like most video games have done till now, this console can simulate the real physical behavior of light in real time, and how it affects every single pixel on screen. And I can also feel not just the general rumble from my engine thanks to DualShock, but also the physical sensation of putting pressure on the pedal thanks to the new adaptive triggers in this controller that can adjust their tension on the fly. Every PlayStation console together in one frame. What a sight. Imagine what the PS6 is going to look like. True. Now, as slick as the PS5 does, they make the console not just a glossy, just color matching over the existing.
I have seen the end, but in the end of this video, I'm going to show you how many PlayStations do you need if you want to play every single PlayStation game ever. So stay tuned to the end. But now let's do Nintendo. Wow, fitting. Wow, super
Den
fitting.
ultimative sportssamling er tilbage. Inviter familie og venner til at dyste i 6 sportsgrene. Eller tage kampen op online. Bevæg dig, spil og have det sjovt med Nintendo Switch Sports. Kun til Nintendo Switch.
Når jeg skal have nyt gear, så sidder jeg og kigger lang tid efter, hvad er det lækreste, den tekniske specifikation, og jeg skal bruge det her, jeg skal bruge det her.
I've just bought every single Nintendo home console ever. We've got a TV from the time of each one's release, and even the main Super Mario game for every single one. So let's see how much better the gaming experience has become. Nintendo's first home console, the NES, couldn't have come at a worse time in the West. The company had had huge success with their arcade machines, but when it finally came to entering the living room in the early 1980s, the entire video game market just so happened to be experiencing what's still known as the Great Video Game Crash of 1983. Put simply, everyone was making games consoles. There had become far too many to choose from, and every single one had their own separate, confusing selection of rushed, poor quality games. The entire reputation of a video game console was the worst that it had ever been, to the point where critics were even saying that gaming is a fad and that the entire concept would actually die out in a couple of years. But this didn't put Nintendo off, and in fact they did something very clever to try and spin it to their advantage. They created a games console that looked nothing like a games console, and they called it the Nintendo Entertainment System to avoid the stigma that came with the term video game. They even bundled 2 controllers in the box to make it more of a family living room item than something just for the solo gamer. This was a calculated move. This entire package is so unbelievably old that it almost just looks alien, doesn't it? The controllers, the types of cables and the adapters you find here, none of it even resembles what we use today.
Wow.
I can't believe I'm about to switch on a console from 1985. And this TV, I've never seen anything like it. And apparently it turns on by...
But there's also the
No,
Famicom
let's
version.
try that again.
This
Now we
is
turn the console on.
version.
Wait,
I've heard.
what? The game is booted up the second you turn the
That's
power
insane.
button on. And then you've actually got physical dials to be able to adjust the picture profile on the screen. This entire thing is just so satisfying. This is going to sound ridiculous, but bear with me here. Because with a 1.7 megahertz processor, a whole 2 kilobytes of RAM, and a maximum resolution of 240p, the NES was actually spec'd like a next-gen machine when compared to the Atari 2600s that people were playing before them. And as a huge fan of just video games in general, the craziest part of this for me is that this console is the console where Nintendo launched the first ever Zelda game, and more importantly, the first ever Mario game. Let's plug the Player One controller in. Oh my gosh. This feels like such a moment in gaming history. Like, imagine if you could have taken the small group of developers that made this and showed them what Mario would actually become today. You can hear that same jump sound even in today's games. And it's crazy that the entire game basically works with one face button. The text itself is kind of hard to read because of how low the resolution is, but the game is very playable even today. Regardless, this little red plumber was an instant hit. And when you combine Mario with the console's beautiful, clean graphics, its branding as a must-have toy instead instead of a games console, as well as its rock bottom price of $250 in today's money, you can probably see how it became the most popular console in history, selling 61.9 million units, which was enough that Nintendo had arguably saved the entire video game industry. By the time they decided to release the NES's successor, they didn't even have to worry about a dying market anymore. And what a successor it was. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
That's the Famicom version. I have researched a little bit. Oh no, yes, I have researched. But does look more like the Famicom because the American, if we can search it up. Oops, I've turned on. The SNES, the SNES. Yeah, boom. This is the more America. Boom. See, this is the American version. So I just want. Oh wait, that's the tiny version. That's the classic version. But yeah, this is the American version. So yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know. I just letting you guys some facts.
Released about 5 years later at a much higher price tag of $450 in today's money, was basically an NES with every aspect dialed up to the max. For starters, the controller was probably the single most important controller ever made, bringing in a smoother, more hand-friendly design, 2 extra face buttons, X and Y, that set the standard for how all future controllers would be made, and also shoulder buttons. All controllers up until this point relied almost entirely on your thumbs as the only input, but this controller is what made gamers realize that actually every single finger could be an input. And this would allow for games with a new tier of complexity. Whether it be drifting in Super Mario Kart or aiming your arm cannon diagonally in Super Metroid. Yeah, Nintendo loved using the word super. It was basically their way of saying next gen. There's a similarly enormous set of cables and adapters to last time, and then the SNES itself, which is actually lighter than I expected for something that's an absolute beast in performance. And I'm not exaggerating when I use the term beast. The way to calculate graphics power is a little complex for these early consoles, but just to give you an idea of how much more capable it could be, the SNES came with 64 times the amount of RAM versus their last machine. What is it with the pull tabs on these old TVs? I love the clickiness of everything. It's also so crazy that this is what the games used to look like. And then to turn the console on, there is a switch.
I love the DVD disc, whatever.
Nintendo Switch.
You kidding again?
Wait! Did you download Grammarly?
Wait, it can't skip right now.
Come on, man. Everyone's using it. If you want to ace this paper, then don't press submit. Grammarly helps you clean up your messy, confusing sentences to get your point across.
Nintendo presents. Ah, that's so much better. Music in this video is giving me chills. And it's also noticeably higher resolution music than the last console. In a way, the SNES was the pinnacle of 2D gaming, just before the 3D era. With this much power, developers could basically make any 2D game they wanted to. So if we compare Super Mario World on the SNES versus Super Mario Bros on the NES, the backgrounds feel so much more alive, with multiple layers.
Still fun why he's here on the ground. Why couldn't he not just find a bigger table? Because I know there's more, but still, you can just find a bigger table.
Moving at different speeds as you walk to simulate things being closer and further away from you. It's also a shocking amount sharper. Like, text on this is barely readable. This one has like no problems at all. And objects also have proper lighting and shadows for the first time ever. Now that that has become my benchmark, I can almost feel the wonder that people must have felt when stepping into this game for the first time. Why am I excited by the fact that Mario has a new spinny jump? The SNES didn't quite trounce the sales figures of the original NES, but for a console released only a few years later, the fact that it still sold 49 million units is nothing to be scoffed at. But with consoles like Sony's first PlayStation leading the charge into 3D gaming very shortly after, Nintendo had to find a way to keep up. Enter the Nintendo 64. Named after its new 64-bit chip that could now process data in larger chunks at a time, making it perfect for 3D. Man, this box is so wacky. Love it. And the controller, equally so. But as much as it does look like something Batman might throw at a villain's face, this was just as big of a deal as the SNES controller. Thanks to the invention of the analog stick by a Nintendo employee. You're going to start to notice a theme in this video, that even more so than the machines themselves, the key to Nintendo's console success is all about controller innovation. And then we've got the console, which is almost as weird looking as the controller. True. Now here's the thing, the Nintendo 64 had all the ingredients of a slam dunk console. Firstly, as you might have guessed by how it's literally...
How you go to hold it right.
Named after its new processor, this was the most powerful console in the world. The fact that we had a 64-bit processor in a machine that was literally $300 in today's money, this was almost science fiction. And it made this thing approximately 30 times more powerful than the SNES. Or, what's even harder to grasp, 1,920 times more powerful than the NES. Why is there a button here? That makes no sense. But the analog stick was a game changer. The analog stick made the Nintendo 64 the most natural way to traverse 3D environments. Plus, the biggest thing that set
like that time, there also came the updated version of the PlayStation 1 controller.
Separated Nintendo from other console titans like Sony and Microsoft was the fact that they weren't just console designers, they were game developers. So they never just made the box and then hoped lots of great games were made for it. They made the box and the main games that you'd want to buy with it. I'm just now realizing this has 4 controller ports compared to 2 on every past console. The N64 was home to truly legendary games like Zelda Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, and Super Mario 64. You bet we're gonna test it. Thankfully a TV I understand. I love these switches. And the other upside is that your pet can no longer turn your gaming console off. You can actually see it take a minute to get to the right level of brightness. Oh my gosh. I can't even begin to describe the difference here. Mario 64 might just be the most influential video game ever. You can see how Mario 64 was the proof of concept for how future 3D worlds would work. How you'd be able to move within them, how the camera would follow you, and how you'd be able to interact with objects inside of it. Remember, this is all new. You could argue that SNES games have actually aged better, because 2D games that look like that are still a thing now, whereas 3D games that look like this are not. But putting myself in the shoes of someone whose best gaming experience so far was that, and handing them this, I would have paid to see their reactions. So why didn't it do better? Even with all of this going for it, the N64 only managed to sell 32.9 million units in its lifetime. Wow. Which almost makes it seem like Nintendo is trying so hard for nothing. And to put it simply, it's because they now had a major competitor in the form of PlayStation. The PS1, while not as capable on paper, beat Nintendo to market with a 3D capable machine by a full 2 years, which was enough of a lead that all the pioneers who really wanted a 3D console, they already had one. This was no doubt extremely frustrating for Nintendo. So when it came time for their follow-up console, the GameCube, they made sure that they released closer to the next PlayStation, the PS2, and they made sure that they used a similar disc-based format, and they made sure that when it came to power, they beat it. And that with the machine itself, they outdid them completely. This is a very meaty console. Everything in this box is just much denser than before. The wiring, the controller that looks like it's from another planet, and of course the machine itself. It genuinely gives off the vibe of a mini supercomputer, apart from the cute little handle on top that also makes it look like a lunchbox. But the console does send a very clear message. You want to play 3D games with incredible graphics? This is the box you need. And it has the specs to back it up too. Compared to the N64, it was approximately 5 times more powerful. You ready for yet another nostalgia hit? Oh my gosh, that's the GameCube screen. You can instantly tell it's higher resolution. Gotta say, Nintendo was definitely playing the weird card here. Nothing about this controller makes any sense. Like, only one side of the controller has 2 shoulder buttons. The second analog stick is so tiny and strange. So and the face buttons too. What is this arrangement? The shoulder buttons travel.
Weird. I don't know why some of them have like. I've seen Xbox and Nintendo
so far, and then when you get to the bottom, they have this click.
At the same place as PlayStation.
That's so nice. I can see why people still use this thing today. Right, Simba is behind the consoles. Please don't unplug anything. There we go. This is an enormous jump. Like, the amount of effects on display here is a world above. The water looks amazing. And you can even feel how hot it is in the game because of how heat distorts things that are further away. The resolution is 480p, or 4.5 times the number of pixels versus the N64, which is an enormous jump. But I wouldn't say it looks 4.5 times as sharp, which is at least in part due to the fact that the N64 was designed with CRT TVs in mind. And also the fact that with later consoles, Nintendo has opted for a smoother, more refined look. I almost feel bad for Nintendo, because even with the intense focus on trying to make the best console they possibly could, even with an exceptional controller and a pretty reasonable price of $330 in today's money, the GameCube sold even worse than the N64, with a total of 21.75 million units. And you could point to the lack of online gaming as a reason, or maybe the fact that the GameCube focused too much on...
Yeah, I've seen those. It's not that... If you had a GameCube, I have not, but I've seen the disc is not the normal CD or DVD, because they're actually smaller than the actual ones, so it's not as great games you can get on them. Like many game developers have not wanted it because it's not as powerful as the DVD or something. But
Nintendo's own games and lacked third-party support. But I think the crux of it is just the competition. The PS2 it was up against sold like nothing we'd ever seen before, insane. At 158 million units. Not to mention, Xbox had just joined the battle too, with huge games like Halo and Fable further squeezing Nintendo's share of the gaming pie. But this failure taught Nintendo their most important lesson yet. It's time to talk about the Wii. And if you're enjoying this video, then a sub-channel would be...
knows that one. Because it's so iconic, the Wii.
Har du overvejet at lease din nye Kia? Du får lækkert udstyr, plads til hele familien og masser af køreglæde for en fast lav pris per måned. Serviceeftersyn er inkluderet. Se mere om Kia privatleasing på kia.com.
Why should you use Miro? When you draw on a whiteboard, no one sees it. With Miro, you plan together in real time from literally everywhere. It's
sure, but no.
It took until this point, 2006, for Nintendo to realize that they didn't want to compete with PlayStation and Xbox anymore. But more importantly, that they didn't need to. That the joy of gaming didn't require the most chunky, extreme-powered machine. And so with this console, there was a complete paradigm shift in thinking. This is when Nintendo started focusing on fun. And in doing so, created their most successful, widely appealing console ever. In fact, without even unboxing the console, you can already see how they managed to appeal to the everyday person who might not even call themselves a gamer. This is the most organized console package I've ever seen, with 2 drawers to separate the different sets of parts. And it comes with literally everything. An enormous operations manual.
I know the red one, but I think also a Wii Mini, but
a stand to keep the console upright. There's yet another controller that had never been seen before, and arguably the craziest one yet, even a case to protect the controller. Who does that? These companies make so much money off players breaking their controllers and then having to buy new ones. But there's more. You've got the sensor bar to detect motion from your controllers, a couple of cables for power and connection to the TV, and then the machine itself. And this is also very different. You can probably tell by how it only takes up a small part of the overall package. The console's tiny size, or its simple design, that's far less about trying to look like a high-end gaming rig like most consoles, and more about trying to blend in. That the promise of the Wii isn't really about the console. The hardware itself is only a 1.27 times improvement over the GameCube, which by gaming console standards is completely unheard of. And this must have been a very scary move for Nintendo to make, because each generation up until this point was all about power. More power was the entire way that you could offer gamers more possibilities within your games. And while Nintendo was sat here making 1.27 times improvements, Sony and Microsoft were making 20, 30x improvements to their hardware. But what it all came down to was this. This was when Nintendo's continuous focus on controller innovation finally paid off. You'll notice it looks a lot like a TV remote, and that even the Wii's interface looks like a TV's interface, with each app being a channel that you had to point your remote at. None of this was an accident. Given that Nintendo was now purposefully giving up on the traditional hardcore console gamer, they needed to make sure that this console was as simple as possible for the new, more casual audience they were now going after. People who may never have used a games console before. How do you do that? Well, make it as similar as possible to what they're already used to. Genius. We've got my own personalized me ready to go. Love this music. Such a headbanger. Alright, let's play some games. It's so weird, like to play this game you also have to attach what they call the nunchuck accessory, just really to give you a joystick. Okay, so you can definitely tell that the game objects have stepped up in complexity. The game is also a little bit sharper, but it definitely doesn't feel next gen. To be honest, I'd say the biggest change as far as the gameplay is concerned is more the ambition of the title itself. Nintendo's gone from exploring an island to exploring galaxies. But do you know what actually sealed the deal for this console? It was the fact that every single Wii at launch came bundled with a free copy of Wii Sports, which was little more than a mini-gaming concept. 5 different sports that you can play with these almost comically low-budget looking characters. Gamers laughed at it, but their grandmas didn't. For a casual gamer, this was the most seamless, organic gaming experience they'd ever had before. You could have your entire family playing at the same time, you could customize these characters to look like the people playing, and the gameplay itself required, no joke, 0 explanation. All leading the Wii to shatter everyone's sales expectations at 102 million units. But the best part of this is that they did this not by stealing Sony and Xbox's market share, but instead bringing a whole new audience into the world of gaming. So, Nintendo finally got that big break they'd worked so hard for. But where'd you go from there? Well, the Wii U.
You! No, not me, you! Yes, I am you!
And I gotta say, this is the least Nintendo-feeling unboxing experience. Very much a weighty, premium, more mature package than the more toy-like appearance of past consoles.
He said the premium version. That's the white version, that's the normal one, and then we have the black version, the more powerful
almost manual
version.
pack. Again, a free game in the box, perhaps trying to replicate the success of Wii Sports with the Wii. And being the premium pack, this box is absolutely rammed with all manner of peripherals. And we haven't even got to the second part of the package, which has the console. Oh my gosh, this is the best peel I've ever experienced. It's really good. And then, yet another completely new type of controller. So here's what I think happened with the Wii U. Nintendo thought, okay, we've got the casual gamer. The Wii brand is so strong and uncontested that when we release the next gen Wii, all those casual gamers are obviously gonna buy it. But how do we make this also appeal to traditional gamers? Because remember, that's where the major money is. While the original Wii proved that casual gamers will buy consoles, they tend to be far less interested in buying lots of games for them. This is why I think Nintendo's gone for such mature packaging. This is why they've offered the console in both a casual basic version as well as the slick black premium version. This is why Nintendo's gone back to making big power jumps, with the Wii U's graphics processing unit being slated as 20 times more powerful than the Wii's, making it approximately 240,000 times more powerful than the original NES. And this is why they came up with the Wii U gamepad. This was the key selling point in Nintendo's marketing. A gamepad that can connect to the console over Wi-Fi and stream the game running on the console onto the screen of your handheld, which had two major implications. That you could A, play the majority of your games entirely on the gamepad, providing you were in range, which meant that even if someone else wanted to use the TV to watch the sports game, you could still carry on using your console
This year, it's 40 years. Oh my god.
Its entirety, which is actually wildly impressive to look at. This is so much slicker and sharper and faster than the Wii's interface. But also, it allows you to have a dual screen experience. Nintendo had already found with their handheld DS consoles that there was an appetite for one screen that showed you the main gameplay and then a secondary screen that you could interact with. And the Wii U basically brought that same concept into the home console realm. The gamepad truly feels like it was designed for the real nerd gamer.
What? The Nintendo Switch, it is coming as the next thing. Don't worry. Why does it feel like Disney Infinity game, Disney Infinity 1 when in the monster? I forgot what the name was, but with Mike Wazowski.
iPhone 14 og iPhone 14 Plus. Super fede, ikke? Med byt til nyt for 3 kan du få dem til en ekstra god pris. Send din gamle, spar på din nye. Byt løs på 3.dk. Nemmere bliver det ikke.
So, me. Well, Nintendo made sure that the Wii U also still worked with their old Wii motion controllers to capture that same magic for the casual player. Oh wow, this is true next generation compared to that. This immediately makes the Nintendo Wii look old school. Ah, it's got real-time shadows too, so you can see as I hop under this tree, the shade is also present on my character. As far as graphics are concerned, this is an everything upgrade. This is textures, lighting, shadows, effects. This is 720p gaming running at 60 frames per second. The jump is literally the difference between feeling retro and feeling modern day. The problem, though, is that I think in trying to appeal to both serious and casuals, they've actually appealed to neither. They've tried to make the console look and sound similar to the Wii, to signal to the casual fans that this is the new Wii, but in doing so have made it thoroughly unexciting for the serious gamers, who dismissed it out the gate as just more simple minigames. This new gamepad wasn't enough to satisfy the serious gamers, who wanted big screen experiences, not small screen experiences. And at the same time, it was just confusing to the more casual players, making the Wii U seem like an add-on for the Wii as opposed to a new console entirely. And 3, it wasn't powerful enough to take on the PS4, but it was powerful enough that when paired with all the other sensors that you need to make this work, it was very expensive, with the deluxe pack that I've got here starting at $450 in today's money. As someone who was a handheld gamer first,
I actually loved the Wii U, and I was so unbelievably jealous of those who could pre-order it and actually hold one of these in their hands. But it didn't take long to find out that commercially, this was a complete and utter failure, selling less than any other Nintendo home console in history.
Oh no!
But it's funny how these things work, because for the second time, right after Nintendo's biggest failure, they were about to have their biggest success. The Nintendo Switch. It's actually a very similar idea to the Wii U before it, but it's just the extra 5 years of tech advancements that had happened since then allowed Nintendo? That might be a funny joke, Nintendo.
No.
But it's just the extra 5 years of tech advancements that had happened since then allowed Nintendo to actually execute the concept properly. It's a smaller, lighter box than before. You get a power cable, and then a bunch of accessories for, would you believe it, a completely new type of controller, the Joy-Cons. And then the console, which is a little different. Right, I'm just going to say it now. I think the Nintendo Switch is the most intelligently designed console on this planet. The idea is the same as the Wii U, of being able to play your games either on the big screen or in handheld, but because the power is located in the handheld itself, as opposed to having to stream it over Wi-Fi, you can take this console anywhere and instant resume your game from where you left off, all while it charges up your Joy-Cons automatically. But it gets better, because the way these Joy-Cons are able to separate from the console and can work independently by just flipping them sideways means that you can have multiplayer gaming. And then the cherry on top is that by embedding them with gyro sensors, they've even managed to recreate the motion controls of the Wii and the Wii U without needing to stick a fiddly sensor on top of your TV. Now, the Switch is not super impressive to the nerd within me, with a pretty crummy display by smartphone standards, and occasional issues with the Joy-Con joysticks drifting even when you're not touching them, and also just the simple fact that this is not a big power upgrade, being only about 1.5 times the power of the Wii U.
What?
Or about 370,000 times the power of the NES, which, when you put it that way, actually sounds really impressive. But the key thing is that in the exact same way that Nintendo managed to separate themselves from Sony and Xbox with the Wii by targeting a completely new type of gamer, the Switch has also been separated by being a legitimate handheld console in its own right. Now, all that stuff about power said, this is still a definitively better gaming experience than the Wii U. It's a combination of modern graphical techniques, of more advanced ways to interact with the environment, more complex game mechanics, better control over the camera, just all the kind of modern quality of life improvements that you expect with a game today. Like, the way that I can spin the hat on my head by using motion controls is really immersive. The best compliment I could give it is that I play games on a PlayStation 5, and coming from that, this is good enough that it doesn't feel jarring. And when you pair the frankly genius design of the console itself with a games lineup that includes all the main series Pokemon games, Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Animal Crossing and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, I'm not even surprised that this thing has already sold 111 million units, and we're only partway through its life cycle.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever seen a more beautiful sight than what I'm looking at right now.
Wait, what about...
Except maybe this app...
Why is that so different than the PlayStation, where he like turn the camera so we can see? Technically, we can't even see them all in one side. And there... Why? He needs to update the PlayStation, oh my god.
App called Honeygain. It's a genuinely fascinating concept. When you install the app on your device, it runs as a background task, allowing you to share your internet connection and earn money from it. There are a whole load of trusted companies out there, like price comparison sites, who actually need access to lots of different internet connections.
I've just bought every single Xbox.
I don't have more time in my today's schedule. That will be a future video. If you enjoyed the video, so yeah, this is technically being a 2-part video, maybe in the future 3-part. I don't know. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will put his videos and his channel in the description and the playlist in the description down below. So nothing more to say to you guys then. Have a beautiful day, guys, and please like and subscribe and turn notification on all. Goodbye.